So all the panelists have the seats. So as rightly said, the topic is really very interesting. Gap between education and the future workforce. Before we discuss anything about that, we should know that in our education, especially in higher education, who are the stakeholders, who are the inputs, what is the output that we are expecting, and why this gap is coming. In any higher education system, the inputs are students, faculty, we have the infrastructure, equipment, building space, money and funds. And then we have the education, which we have to be answerable to the society, and we have education where we should be useful to the industry or the society. Whatever education you take, finally, that education should be useful either to the industry or to the society. And the output of this system is in the form of our graduates, either undergraduates or postgraduates or PhDs. And the output of these outputs of these students are measured in terms of the publications in journals, books, patents, technology, and skill sets that they learn. But obviously, one thing is very, very clear that we cannot create a situation where we can make ready-made candidates for the industry because our curriculum does not allow that. The curriculum is not tailor-made for each industry. It is a general curriculum where we tend to impart skills, the basic skills, and then once he joins a particular type of industry or a particular workplace, he has to adapt, easily adapt to that sort of thing. So this is how the situation right now remains. So definitely in many of the jobs, in fact, there are people who are engineers, but they are doing something else. You know, just as an engineer, maybe an IAS officer is doing administrative job. Then we have a sort of a doctor who is in construction business. So nothing related to what he does and what he actually works. So this is how this gap has come. So what I have been advised by the organizers is to keep very brief and not allow every speaker to speak, but I'll give about 5 minutes to each speaker to give your ideas. Especially I start with Dr. Atish Chattopadhyay, Director IMT Ghaziabad. Your views on why this gap between the education and the future workforce?
To me, the gap will always exist. And important thing is how one adjusts to that gap. And that is the critical challenge. Because when we are talking about education, there will be something which is futuristic happening in the industry, the innovation is happening, and what is happening in the classroom, there will be a gap. But how do we make our students adapt to the situation where they understand that this gap exists, and given the nature of environment that they will be getting into, which is far more unstructured, far more uncertain, the important thing is to make the students comfortable to live with uncertainty. I'll give you a simple example. Okay, to me, what is happening in energy today is what was happening to chips or computers in the 80s. Okay, I think the energy, we are talking about electric cars, so on and so forth. Now, the whole issue is this, that when we discuss an Intel case in the class, I'm just taking an example, can we also talk about how do we foresee the energy sector to evolve going forward? And how do we remain comfortable in a situation which will probably not be as comfortable? I think that is the key challenge. Instead of saying that, okay, this is what happened in Intel, and this is how the chips and the computers have evolved, let us take that case and move forward, what could be the possible scenarios in energy. So then what happens is that the students become comfortable in thinking through what are the challenges going forward, what are the uncertainties, and how do I prepare myself for those uncertainties. I think that is the critical factor which becomes important. So to me, the gap will exist, but it is far more important to make the students aware that how do we cope up with this uncertainty and this gap. I think that is the critical factor.
Yeah, I think you're right, but you are aware that, to fill this gap already many technologies have come, like finishing schools, then skill development. All these things have come up only because we have realized that most of our students are unemployable who come out of the system are not employable. So that's why we are trying to introduce course after their graduation or post-graduation and impart them special training. So Dr. Ahuja, I would like to express your view on that.
First, my gratitude to the organizers for giving us this opportunity of being here and sharing our views and thoughts. We are going to have machines which are going to think, but in the process we have forgotten to teach our students how to think. We call it the digital age. To me, it's a critical age. We are going to prepare students for technologies that don't exist today. It's a big challenge. It's worrisome, in fact. How are we going to do this? And one way is to look at the curriculum. We always talk of curriculum and then we say we must have relevant curriculum. To make it relevant, we at College of Engineering, Pune have embarked upon a new thought process where this is a solution, one of the solutions. Not a complete solution, but at least we'll try to minimize the gap between what the industry expects and what we are able to deliver. Every faculty at the college is empowered to identify an industry expert from his or her domain and invite that industry expert to co-teach the curriculum. So the faculty would share the entire curriculum, and 25 to 30% of that curriculum is taught by the industry expert, bringing in case studies, the technology roadmap, where technology is heading, and so on and so forth, to try and bring relevance into our curriculum. But the most important thing is that we give them strong foundations of science and mathematics. So we have a course on biology for our students. At College of Engineering, Pune, perhaps we may be the only institute in the country to have mathematics in all the 8 semesters of undergraduate education, because maths will be required by the students if they have to become lifelong learners. We have a course on entrepreneurship. We have a course on innovation and design thinking for every student at the College of Engineering, Pune. We also have a course on liberal learning. A student could take up a course on arts, on music, on singing, on photography, something which he wanted to do, and we also talk of peer learning. So we have as many as 34 clubs at our college, and students participate in different clubs, and that is how their learning takes place. It's only year before last, our undergraduate students launched a Pico satellite in space, which was launched by ISRO. Now this was done by a group of students, 172 students, over a period of 7 years. 7 batches would have rolled out, but the mantle was passed on from one batch to the other, and they created a small Pico satellite for point-to-point communication. Now this is something very, very amazing. All we need to do is empower them and facilitate their peer learning and give them more freedom to learn. And one more important aspect of this teaching learning process, which we realized, is it's not only about teaching and learning, but it's also about evaluation and assessment, how we examine our students, right? And how we and that examination helps us to make them think, so that we have a different breed of engineers. Probably if I'm given more time, we can come back again.
I think College of Engineering Pune is a role model for many of the engineering colleges, and in the past as well as in the future. In fact, apart from all these courses, some institutes are also teaching what we call as human ethics. That is also a very important part, so that wherever they go, they perform well in terms of whatever is done. Now I invite Professor Rupa Manjari Ghosh, Vice Chancellor, Sivnadar University.
I also could not be here in the morning. There are other engagements. So, but because the session was running a little late, I could hear a bit of the last one. So that was my good fortune. So what I'm going to do based on that, I'll skip some parts and I'll take a slightly larger canvas. The skill development and all these issues, I'm hearing it for the last few years, and I think people are aware of it. I'm going to talk about a bit of futuristic university scape. And I think that has to do with two aspects, and let me just get to that point right away. We are living in an age that is characterized by Industry 4.0. So this is the fourth industrial revolution that's going on, and it has led to a lot of anxiety on various sectors. So it's characterized by large-scale digital platforms, automation essentially, with AI, cloud, the Internet of Things, what have you. And as a result of that, a lot of jobs are becoming extinct. And I think worldwide that has been a concern, and India is talking about this, particularly Niti Aayog is talking about this quite a bit. So that's one side of the story, Industry 4.0. So I would urge that education also catches up and makes itself Education 4.0, and I'm going to just talk about what that futuristic education system should be. It's connected with the word that phrase that everybody's using, future of work. So let me just not just talk about skills. There is a catch there. So increasingly, I find education at the school and education and university level is getting divorced from the questions of livelihood. And that's a much bigger problem. I mean, take energy or water or all the other sectors, livelihood issues are not being discussed, say, in a school of education. And I think it's high time that we sort of rectify this and look at that. And the reason for that, I'll just elaborate. The universities are kind of universal quantities. And I'd like to urge that we do not just respond to the market, but we drive it. So the future of jobs also has to be driven by the system of, so if I think of what people call the knowledge triangle, so the role of the university is actually embedded in that. You disseminate knowledge, that is you teach, you generate knowledge, so new knowledge, you research, and you apply that knowledge, and that's where your partnership with the industry, the workforce come in. So that triangle of knowledge is to be driven by universities of the future, and today and future is already here, plus the partners. Gone are the days where you talk about excellence in isolation, that there is an eminent institution that's doing very well. We essentially need to cater to and then actually actively engage in building that ecosystem that sustains excellence. Innovation doesn't come, sorry to say this, innovation doesn't come if you just give some incentive. There are famous quotes, famous examples all over the world. It has to come from this ecosystem that we create that nurtures exploration, that nurtures research, and therefore innovation would be the sidekick of it. And there is no age limit for all of this. So my point is the following, that because of Industry 4.0, if we are worried also that how universities should prepare, you asked some very valid question at the beginning, sir. But if our graduates are not being employable, that's one area of question that people have addressed. I'm talking about how universities prepare their graduates for jobs of future, the future of work, which is unknown. The only thing the universities can do is the training of the mind. And I think Professor Ahuja touched upon that have you forgotten thinking? So I think the critical thinking, that critical ability to solve problems is the real knowledge today. And that's what universities have to gear up to. Okay. And that would take care of this problem, this divorcing the questions of skilling. Because if you just look at skilling, the people you skill today are going to be unskilled tomorrow because they will not be employable because you do not even know the job market a few years from now. So my plea is this twofold. Let's look at future of work. Let's look at the role of universities as a universal quantity and the role it has to play in driving this market, which would determine the future.
Now we have the last speakers, Mr. Rahul Agarwal, co-founder and CEO Nimbus. And based on your speech, we'll decide whether we have time for taking any questions. So it's you can sit here.
So I think some of the points made by the panel are excellent, and I would agree with them. I would just like to emphasize one or two things. So how many of us, when we were younger, we used to remember phone numbers and birthdays? Right? We all did. Now my phone does, right? I don't. And that's the problem with knowledge. What kind of knowledge you need changes. And thus, I think this point has been made that the critical skill is the ability to learn rather than the knowledge imparted at college, simply the knowledge imparted. And this becomes even more important when we start talking about, the future of work, and we talk about how artificial intelligence will take away a lot of the jobs which are repetitive in nature, which means the skills we need are more towards communication, where humans have an ability which I don't think is so easy for machines to ever catch up with. But if you take away the road jobs, then the soft skills become much more important. And I think that's one aspect which I would love to see colleges do better on. The second piece, I'm just saying, from a knowledge-filling perspective. I mean, curriculum will always play a catch-up role to where industry is already gone. Since we were talking about that issue, micro-certifications. I mean, today, digitally, there's so much content available. It's not necessary for the college to teach all of it. So I think the onus has to also shift from saying that the colleges need to prepare the students, that the students need to also prepare themselves. And they can do a lot more, online, digitally, which the college doesn't need to always provide. So I think the role of the college, the facilitation it provides, is the skills, is the learnability, the ability to think, ability to analyze, ability to problem solve, ability to communicate. If you develop these, the student will be somebody who can cope up with how the future of work changes. So I'll just keep it short to that. You have 2 minutes. Okay. So then I'll bring up another point. When you look at the aspirations of the youth, so I was in a school, I was just talking to them. This was in Bangalore. So I was just doing a simple frequency thing on who wants to be what. As you would expect, being Bangalore, 80% of the kids in the class wanted to be engineers. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I tried to encourage the people who wanted to do something different, who wanted to be an artist, who wanted to be a photographer. And then finally I came back to one of the kids who said he wants to be an engineer and asked him why. The question that surprised me was why he wanted to be. So the example he said is that I want to create another Infosys. Dr. Murthy has made millions of people rich, not just himself. And that perspective, that larger perspective, that level of aspiration, I find even when I talk to my staff and talk about their kids and what they want their kids to do, that aspiration level has changed. And if India's aspirations have changed, then our universities need to think about what these kids can do. I think Indians, across the world, wherever we've gone, we've done really well. So we have that ability to find our own path. What needs to happen is just that our eyes are opened and opportunities are shown to us. We can choose for ourselves. So I'm again and again basically coming back to the point that the onus needs to shift, not just at the university does its job of teaching the learnability piece, and the knowledge piece needs to shift a lot more to the student.